On a quiet morning in 2026, 68-year-old Michael sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a stack of mail. Most of it was junk: credit card offers, insurance advertisements, grocery coupons. Then he noticed an official-looking envelope connected to Social Security. He almost ignored it. After all, he had worked for more than 40 years. He was already receiving benefits. What could possibly be inside that he didn't already know? A few minutes later, Michael was staring at a number that made his stomach drop. It wasn't a warning letter. It wasn't a benefit cut. It wasn't fraud. The problem was something far more dangerous. He suddenly realized that one retirement decision he had made years earlier could affect every Social Security check he received for the rest of his life. And unlike a bad investment, there was no easy undo button. Now imagine two Americans. Both worked for 4 decades. Both paid Social Security taxes every year. Both retired in good health. Yet one of them will collect tens of thousands of dollars more over retirement. Not because they earned dramatically higher salaries. Not because they invested better. Not because they were lucky. The difference comes down to a choice many people make in less than 10 minutes. That is why a strange phrase began spreading across retirement forums and YouTube videos in 2026. Born before 1966? Urgent Social Security warning. Millions clicked. Some became scared. Others became confused. Was the government changing benefits? Were checks being reduced? Was Social Security running out of money? The headlines sounded terrifying, but the real story was something almost nobody expected. Michael's first reaction was fear. Like millions of retirees, he had seen years of alarming headlines. He had heard politicians arguing about Social Security. He had heard warnings about trust funds. He had heard predictions about future benefit cuts. The more information he consumed, the less certain he felt, and that uncertainty pushed him toward a decision that many retirees later regret. What makes this story so important is that it affects nearly every American family. In January 2026, nearly 71 million Social Security beneficiaries received a 2.8% cost of living increase. The average monthly benefit increased by roughly $56. For some retirees, that extra money helped. For others, rising costs swallowed it almost immediately. But Michael wasn't worried about $50. He was worried about something much larger. What if he had permanently reduced his own benefits? What if the mistake had already happened years ago? What if millions of Americans born before 1966 were unknowingly making the exact same decision right now? The deeper Michael looked, the stranger the story became. He discovered that most retirees spend more time researching a new television than researching their Social Security strategy. Yet Social Security is often worth hundreds of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. One misunderstanding can quietly cost more than a car, more than a vacation, sometimes even more than a home down payment. And then came the twist. The biggest danger wasn't hidden in Washington. It wasn't hidden inside a government report. It wasn't even hidden inside future legislation. The biggest danger was already sitting inside the current system. A rule that had existed for years. A rule most retirees had heard about, but very few truly understood. As Michael continued investigating, he uncovered a shocking reality. The people most worried about Social Security's future were often ignoring the mistake that could hurt them today. And once he understood that mistake, the entire born before 1966 warning suddenly looked completely different. Because this wasn't really a story about government cuts. It was a story about timing. And timing, as Michael was about to learn, could be worth a fortune. Michael expected the warning to be about government cuts. Most people do. But after weeks of research, he discovered something shocking. The biggest threat to many retirees isn't Congress. It isn't inflation. It isn't even the trust fund debate. The biggest threat is a decision millions of people voluntarily make themselves. And once that decision is made, it can follow them for the rest of their lives. Imagine standing in front of 3 doors. Behind door 1 is a smaller Social Security check. Behind door 2 is a larger check. Behind door 3 is the largest check of all. Most people assume the difference can't be that big. After all, it's the same Social Security system, the same worker, the same taxes paid over a lifetime. But that's where the surprise begins. For decades, Americans have been told they can claim Social Security as early as age 62. Many people hear that number and immediately think, why wait? They spent their entire lives working. They want to enjoy retirement. Some worry they may not live long enough to benefit from delaying. Others fear the system itself could change in the future. That fear creates one of the biggest mistakes in retirement planning, because claiming at 62 may permanently reduce monthly benefits compared with waiting until full retirement age. And for some retirees, waiting even longer can increase benefits further. According to Social Security guidance, delaying benefits beyond full retirement age can continue increasing monthly payments until age 70. Now imagine two neighbors. David and Robert both worked for 40 years. Both paid Social Security taxes. Both retired healthy. David claimed at 62 because he wanted money immediately. Robert waited longer. 10 years later, Robert's monthly check is dramatically larger. Every month, that gap continues. Every year, that gap grows. And neither man can travel back in time to change the decision. When Michael first learned this, he couldn't believe it. He had spent years worrying about future politicians. Yet nobody had explained how one claiming decision could potentially be worth tens of thousands of dollars over a retirement that lasts 20 or 30 years. Suddenly, the born before 1966 warning felt much more personal. But then the story became even stranger. Michael discovered that many retirees don't claim early because they carefully calculated the numbers. They claim early because they're scared. Scared of illness, scared of uncertainty, scared of headlines predicting trouble for Social Security. Fear becomes the decision maker, and fear is rarely a good financial planner. At the same time, millions of Americans were celebrating the 2026 Social Security increase. Benefits rose by 2.8%, affecting nearly 71 million beneficiaries. The average retirement benefit increased by roughly $56 per month. On paper, that sounded like good news, but many retirees had a different reaction. Online discussions quickly filled with complaints. Some seniors argued that food, housing, insurance, and healthcare costs were rising faster than their benefit increase. Others worried that Medicare expenses would absorb much of the gain. In community discussions, many retirees said the increase felt smaller than the headlines suggested. And that's when Michael realized something important. Most retirees were looking at the wrong numbers. They were focused on a $56 increase. They were focused on next month's check. Meanwhile, a much bigger issue was quietly hiding in the background. A rule that could affect retirement income for decades, not months. And once Michael discovered that rule, he finally understood why so many experts call Social Security one of the most misunderstood financial systems in America. A few weeks later, Michael met an old friend named Richard. Richard was 63, recently retired, and excited about his new life. He had already started collecting Social Security. Everything seemed perfect. Then he accepted a part-time job to earn some extra money. A few months later, he noticed something strange. His Social Security payments were not what he expected. He felt cheated. Had the government reduced his benefits? Richard was furious. He spent hours reading online forums. Some people blamed politicians. Others blamed Social Security itself. But the truth was much less dramatic and much more important. Richard had stumbled into a rule that millions of Americans don't understand until it affects them personally. A rule hidden inside the system long before he ever retired. The rule is called the Retirement Earnings Test. In 2026, if you are receiving benefits before reaching full retirement age and continue working, earnings above certain limits can temporarily reduce benefits. For workers below full retirement age, the annual limit is $24,480 in 2026. Benefits are withheld at a rate of $1 for every $2 earned above that threshold. When Richard learned this, he thought he had made a terrible mistake. It felt like he was being punished for working, but then he discovered something important. The money wasn't simply disappearing forever. The Social Security system adjusts future benefits to account for months when benefits were withheld. Yet many retirees never learn that second part. They only see money leaving and immediately panic. Michael found countless stories from retirees who experienced the same shock. On Social Security forums, people regularly ask why their checks changed after taking a job. Others discover the earnings limit only after they have already crossed it. The pattern repeats again and again. A misunderstanding becomes fear. Fear becomes frustration. Frustration becomes a belief that the system is broken. Then Michael noticed something even more surprising. The retirees who seemed most stressed were often not the ones receiving the smallest checks. They were the ones depending on those checks the most. Imagine living on a fixed income. Every dollar matters. Every unexpected change feels personal. Every headline feels like a warning directed at you. That is exactly why the 2026 COLA announcement created mixed emotions. Officially, benefits increased by 2.8%, affecting nearly 71 million Social Security beneficiaries. The average average retired worker's benefit increased from roughly $2,015 to about $2,071 per month. On paper, that looked like positive news, but reality felt different for many seniors. Across news reports and community discussions, retirees pointed to rising costs for groceries, housing, healthcare, and Medicare premiums. Some felt the increase helped. Others felt it barely kept up. One common sentiment appeared again and again. The numbers looked better in headlines than they felt in everyday life. Michael began realizing that Social Security isn't just a government program. It's an emotional program. For millions of Americans, these payments represent security, independence, and peace of mind. When people fear losing part of that security, even temporarily, the reaction is powerful. That explains why Social Security headlines consistently attract millions of views online. But while retirees were debating COLA increases and earnings limits, a much bigger fear was quietly growing in the background. A fear connected to reports, projections, and a date that kept appearing in headlines. 2032. Sometimes 2034. The more Michael investigated, the more he realized that this date, not the earnings test, was what truly scared millions of Americans. And once he understood why, he finally uncovered the real reason people born before 1966 were paying such close attention in 2026. By the summer of 2026, Michael thought he finally understood Social Security. He understood claiming ages. He understood earnings limits. He understood COLA increases. Yet one fear refused to disappear. It was the same fear spreading across YouTube videos, Facebook groups, retirement forums, and news headlines. A single date. Sometimes it was 2032. Sometimes it was 2034. And the closer those dates seemed to get, the more worried retirees became. The problem started with a phrase that sounds terrifying: trust fund depletion. To many Americans, those words sound like bankruptcy. They imagine Social Security collapsing overnight. They picture retirees waking up to empty bank accounts and canceled checks. But that is not what official projections actually say. The reality is both less dramatic and more complicated. When Michael first heard that Social Security could run out of money, he imagined the system simply shutting down. Millions of Americans think the same thing, but Social Security is not like a company going bankrupt. Even if trust fund reserves are depleted, payroll taxes would still be collected from workers across America. Money would continue flowing into the system every day. According to the 2026 Trustees Report, the Old Age and Survivors Insurance Trust Fund, the fund that supports retirement benefits, is projected to have enough reserves to pay full scheduled benefits until late 2032. After that, incoming revenue would still be sufficient to pay about 78% of scheduled benefits if lawmakers take no action. That single detail changes everything. The real risk is not that Social Security disappears. The risk is that future benefits could be reduced if Congress does nothing. Yet most headlines skip that explanation. Social Security is running out attracts attention. Social Security would still pay most benefits after reserve depletion attracts far fewer clicks. Then Michael discovered an even more surprising fact. The combined Social Security trust funds are projected to pay full scheduled benefits until 2034. After reserve depletion, continuing income would still cover approximately 83% of scheduled benefits under current projections. Again, not zero, not collapse, not disappearance, but also not the full benefits retirees expect today. This is where emotions start taking over. Imagine being 67 years old. You spent 4 decades paying payroll taxes. You planned your retirement around a certain monthly benefit. Then you hear reports suggesting future reductions may be possible if lawmakers fail to act. Suddenly, every headline feels personal. Every news report feels like a threat to your future. Online discussions reveal how divided Americans are about what happens next. Some believe Congress will eventually raise taxes. Others think benefits may be adjusted. Many believe politicians will act before major reductions occur because millions of voters depend on Social Security. Nobody agrees on the solution. Almost everyone agrees the issue cannot be ignored forever. Then Michael found the statistic that explained everything. In 1960, there were more than 5 workers supporting each Social Security beneficiary. Today, that number is closer to 3 workers per beneficiary and is projected to fall further similar in coming decades. More retirees, fewer workers, longer life expectancies. The math becomes harder every year. Bipartisan Policy Center. But after months of research, Michael reached a surprising conclusion. The people most obsessed with future Social Security reductions were often ignoring a much bigger problem happening right now. They worried about what Congress might do in 2032 or 2034. Meanwhile, they were making retirement decisions today that could permanently reduce their own benefits. And that realization led Michael to the most important lesson in this entire story. After months of reading reports, watching interviews, and studying retirement strategies, Michael expected to discover a secret rule, a hidden government policy, a sudden change targeting people born before 1966. Instead, he found something far simpler and far more important. The biggest threat to many retirees wasn't hidden in Washington. It was hidden in the decisions they made without fully understanding the consequences. Think about it. Millions of Americans spend years worrying about events they cannot control. Elections, future legislation, trust fund projections, economic forecasts. Yet many spend only a few hours researching one decision that could affect every Social Security payment they receive for the next 20 or 30 years. The imbalance is astonishing. The more Michael learned, the clearer the pattern became. Most costly Social Security mistakes don't happen because people are careless. They happen because the system is complicated. Retirement benefits, spousal benefits, survivor benefits, earnings limits, tax considerations, delayed retirement credits. Each rule makes sense individually. Together, they create a maze that many retirees struggle to navigate. That complexity explains why two people with nearly identical careers can end up receiving dramatically different lifetime benefits. One person understands the rules and plans carefully. The other relies on assumptions, headlines, or advice from friends. Years later, the financial gap between them can be enormous, not because one worked harder, but because one made more informed decisions. Michael also noticed something interesting. The retirees who felt the most confident about their future weren't necessarily the wealthiest. They were the ones who understood how their benefits worked. Knowledge reduced uncertainty, uncertainty reduced fear, and reduced fear led to better decisions. In many cases, information became just as valuable as money. As of 2026, Social Security remains one of the largest government programs in the world, providing benefits to nearly 71 million Americans. It faces long-term funding challenges, but it continues delivering monthly payments that millions of retirees depend on. Despite all the alarming headlines, the program remains a central part of retirement for families across the country. That doesn't mean concerns should be ignored. Future reforms may happen. Political debates will continue. Trustees' reports will continue making headlines. Experts will continue arguing about solutions. But Michael realized that worrying alone accomplishes nothing. Preparation, understanding, and informed decision-making accomplish far more. By the end of his journey, Michael finally understood why so many urgent warning videos attract millions of views. Fear captures attention. Fear spreads quickly. Fear makes people click. But once the fear fades, retirees are left with the same challenge they always had, making the best possible decisions with the information available today. And that is the lesson most headlines never mention. The greatest Social Security risk for many Americans isn't a future event that may happen years from now. It's a misunderstanding that exists today. A misunderstanding that can quietly reduce income, create unnecessary stress, and affect retirement for decades. Those risks are real. They're immediate, and they're often overlooked. So if you were born before 1966, the real warning isn't that Social Security is disappearing tomorrow. The real warning is that retirement decisions become increasingly important as retirement gets closer. The choices you make today may matter far more than the headlines you read tomorrow. And with so much uncertainty surrounding the future, perhaps the most important question isn't whether Social Security will change. The real question is, are you making decisions based on facts or based on fear?